The city of Old Town sleeps now. Its winding streets empty, save for the occasional watchman making his rounds. His footsteps echoing off ancient cobblestones worn smooth by countless generations. From my window here in the citadel, I can see the high tower standing tall against the night sky, its beacon fire burning as it has burned for thousands of years. A single point of light in the vast darkness. The stars wheel overhead, the same stars that shepherds watched in the Dawn Age, that guided ships across the narrow sea, that looked down upon the long night when winter came and did not leave. My candle burns low on the desk before me, wax pooling at its base, the flame wavering whenever the wind finds its way through the gaps in the old stone. The sound is soothing, that gentle whisper of air moving through spaces carved out centuries ago when this tower was young and the world was different. I have spread before me a collection of texts and scrolls, some so old their edges crumble at the slightest touch, others more recent, but no less precious. These are the chronicles, the histories, the half-remembered songs of Westeros. And tonight, I find myself unable to sleep, drawn instead to these pages and the stories they hold. Perhaps you too find yourself awake when you should be resting, your mind too full of the day's concerns, or simply reluctant to let go of consciousness and drift into dreams. If so, then join me here in this quiet chamber. There is room enough by the fire for another chair, and the stories I have gathered will ask nothing of you except to listen, to let the words wash over you like waves against a shore, constant and rhythmic and soothing in their ancient familiarity. The ink in my pot has begun to thicken with the cooling night air. My quill, cut from a raven's feather just this morning, rests beside the parchment where I have been recording observations, thoughts, fragments of knowledge gleaned from dusty tomes that haven't been opened in decades. But tonight, I think I shall set aside the formal work of scholarship and simply remember. Simply tell the stories as they were told to me when I was young, before I forged my chain and took my vows, when the world seemed larger and more mysterious than any maester's learning could fully explain. Westeros is old, so old that even we who study its history cannot say with certainty when it truly began, when the first footsteps pressed into its soil, when the first fires were kindled in its forests. The oldest texts speak of ages that blur together, of time measured not in years, but in the rising and falling of dynasties, the slow march of ice and the patient growth of trees. And before the texts, there were only songs. And before the songs, only silence and the memory of the land itself. The fire in the hearth has burned down to glowing embers, casting more shadow than light. Outside, I can hear the distant sound of the Honeywine River flowing past the city walls. An endless whisper of water moving toward the sea. Old Town has stood at this river's mouth since the Dawn Age, they say. There were people here before the Andals, before the first men even, though what those people were, or where they came from, no one can say for certain. The stones themselves might remember, but stones keep their secrets well. Let me pour another cup of wine. It is a vintage from the arbor, sweet and rich, the colour of dark amber in the candlelight. The warmth of it spreads through my chest, loosening the tension that accumulates from too many hours bent over books, from too much time spent in the pursuit of knowledge that always seems to slip just beyond reach. There is something humbling about history, about realizing how little we truly know, and how much has been forgotten, lost to time like sand through fingers. Tonight, I think we shall not concern ourselves with the wars and battles, the grand political machinations, the rise and fall of kings. Those stories have their place, certainly, and I have copied them dutifully into ledgers and chronicles. But tonight, let us speak instead of the quieter things, the deep foundations, the ancient stones, and the hands that laid them, the endless vigil of the night's watch, and the patient turning of seasons, the castles that have stood for thousands of years, their walls soaked with memory, their halls echoing with footsteps that have long since faded to dust. The candle flickers again, and I pause to trim the wick with my small silver scissors. The flame steadies, burns brighter for a moment, then settles into that gentle glow that is most comfortable for aged eyes. I have many more candles, a whole drawer full of them in various stages of use, some tall and fresh, others mere stubs. Tonight may require several before the stories are told, and sleep finally claims us both. So settle yourself comfortably, friend. Pull your chair closer to the warmth of the embers if you feel the chill. The night is long ahead of us, but there is no rush, no urgency. We have all the time we need. Let the city sleep around us. Let the rest of the citadel dream of their studies and debates. Here, in this small circle of candlelight, we have only these old stories and the quiet companionship of shared attention. Shall we begin at the beginning? Or at least, at the beginning as it has been passed down to us through song and chronicle, through whispered tales and careful scholarship. Let us start with the land itself, with Westeros as it was before humans ever set foot upon its shores, when it belonged to others entirely different from us, to those we call the children of the forest, though they were not children at all. Chapter 1. The Dawn Age, and those who sang the song of earth. In the beginning, there were trees, endless forests stretching from the frozen north to the warm southern shores, from the rocky coasts of the Sunset Sea to the narrow waters that would one day be called the Narrow Sea. These were not the managed woodlands we know today, carefully tended and harvested, but wild places where oaks grew as tall as towers and weirwoods stood like pale sentinels, their bone-white bark and blood-red leaves marking them as something set apart from the ordinary green world. And in these forests lived a people who called themselves those who sing the song of earth, though we, in our clumsy human way, have named them the children of the forest. They were small, these children, no taller than a human child even when fully grown, with nut-brown skin dappled like a deer's with paler spots. Their hands had only 3 fingers and a thumb, tipped with black claws instead of nails. Their eyes were large and slitted like a cat's, coloured in gold and green, able to see in darkness where human eyes would find only blindness. They dressed in leaves and bark, in dyed leather and woven grasses, carrying weapons made from the bones of the earth itself. Obsidian, which they called dragon glass, was shaped into arrowheads and knife blades of surpassing sharpness. Their bows were carved from weirwood, those sacred trees with faces carved into their pale trunks. And their arrows flew true in ways that had less to do with skill than with something deeper, some connection to the land that humans would never quite understand. The children lived lightly on the land. They built no cities of stone, raised no great fortifications against enemies. Their dwellings were carved into the faces of hills, woven among the branches of mighty trees, hidden in caves and hollows, where running water sang its endless song. They hunted and gathered, following the seasons and the movements of game, living in harmony with the rhythms of the world in a way that seems almost incomprehensible to us now, with our fields and farms, our roads and castles. But to call their lives simple would be a grave error. The children possessed knowledge and abilities that we would call magic, though they would likely have found that word strange. They're green seers, those wise men and women with special gifts, could see through the eyes of animals, could speak to the trees themselves, could look through the carved faces in the weirwoods and witness events happening far away. Some say they could even peer through time itself, seeing the past and glimpses of the future in ways that mortal minds struggle to comprehend. The giants lived in those days as well. Massive beings who towered over humans and children alike, slow to anger, but terrible in their wrath when roused. The giants and the children shared the land, not always peacefully, but with a kind of mutual reset born from long coexistence. There were other creatures too, beings that have passed into legend and vanished from the world. Great lions larger than any we know today prowled the western hills. Unicorns, yes, genuine unicorns, not the horses with horns attached that charlatans parade in travelling shows, roamed the northern forests. Mammoths moved in great herds. Dire wolves, those massive ancestors of today's far smaller wolves, hunted in packs. How long did this age last? We cannot say with any certainty. The children did not mark time as we do, did not build monuments to commemorate events, or carve their history into stone for future generations to read. They lived, we presume, for thousands of years in this way, perhaps tens of thousands. The world itself was different then. The climate warmer in some ages, colder in others. The very shape of the land changing as ice advanced and retreated according to rhythms we can only guess at. And then, some 12,000 years ago, according to our best reckoning, though that number should be taken with appropriate skepticism, given the haziness of such ancient chronology, the first men came. They crossed from the eastern continent of Essos, using a land bridge that once connected the two great landmasses in the south, where now only the stepstones remain as scattered islands marking where solid earth once stood. The first men came on horses, those magnificent beasts that the children had never seen before, animals that could carry warriors at speeds that made them seem like the wind itself. They came with weapons of bronze, metal that could cut and thrust and parry in ways that obsidian, for all its sharpness, could not match in sustained combat. And they came with bronze axes, and they began to cut down the trees. To understand what happened next, you must understand what those trees meant to the children. The weirwoods, especially, were not simply plants, not merely resources to be harvested. They were sacred, connected to the old gods that the children worshipped, those nameless spirits of stone and stream and sky. When the first men cut down a weirwood, they were not just clearing land for farming. They were committing what the children saw as a desecration, a violence against the very fabric of the world. War came, as war so often does, when one people encroaches upon another's land, when incomprehension meets fear, when two ways of life prove incompatible in too small a space. The children fought back with everything they had. They used their magic, calling upon powers that made the earth itself shake and the seas rise. Legend says that the Green Seers attempted to use these powers to destroy the land bridge entirely, to stop the flow of first men into Westeros by drowning the Arm of Dawn beneath the waves. And indeed, the Arm of Dawn did shatter, whether through the children's magic or through natural forces we cannot say, but the land bridge broke apart, leaving only those scattered islands we call the stepstones. But it was too late. The first men were already in Westeros in great numbers, spreading across the land, building their ring forts and settlements, cutting down forests to plant their crops, pushing ever deeper into what had been the children's domain for time uncounted. The war raged for generations. The old songs say that it lasted 2,000 years. Though again, we should be cautious about accepting such numbers literally. What we can be certain of is that it was long and bitter, that both sides suffered terribly, and that in the end, the children were losing. The first men were simply too numerous, too large, too strong. For every first man who fell to a dragonglass arrow, or was struck down by the children's magic, 10 more seemed to appear, pushing ever northward and westward, claiming the open lands and even beginning to encroach on the deep forests themselves. Eventually, wiser minds on both sides recognized that the war could not continue, that it would lead only to the children's extinction, and the first men's endless struggle against a foe who would never truly surrender. Representatives from both peoples met on an island in the center of a great lake in the Riverlands, a place that would forever after be known as the Isle of Faces. There, in the shadow of countless weirwood trees, they forged the pact. The terms were simple, but profound. The open lands, the coasts and mountains and plains would belong to the first men. They could build their settlements there, plant their crops, raise their families. But the deep forests would remain the children's domain, and no weirwood tree would ever again fall to a first men's axe. To seal this agreement, to make it binding in ways that went beyond mere words, the children carved faces into every weirwood on the Isle of Faces. These carved faces would serve as witnesses, as reminders, as connections to the old gods who would watch over the pact and ensure its keeping. And remarkably, the pact held. Oh, there were certainly violations over the years, small conflicts and misunderstandings. But the Great War ended. The first men and the children learned to live alongside one another. More than that, they began to learn from each other. The first men, who had brought their own gods from Essos, gradually set aside those foreign deities and adopted the worship of the old gods, the nameless spirits that the children revered. They began carving faces into the weirwoods in their own godswoods, those sacred groves that would become a feature of every great castle and keep throughout the land. The age that followed the pact was different from the Dawn Age that had come before. We call it the Age of Heroes, and it was a time of relative peace, of cultural exchange, of humans and children living not in conflict, but in cooperation. It was in this age that many of the great houses trace their origins, when legendary figures, whose very existence is now questioned by skeptical maesters, supposedly walked the earth and performed great deeds. For 4,000 years, they say, the pact held firm. 4,000 years of peace, more or less, broken only by the usual small conflicts that arise when humans live together, disputes over land and honor, and all the 1,000 petty grievances that our kind seems so skilled at nurturing. The children grew fewer in number during this time, not through violence, but through their own nature. They bore few young, lived long lives, but did not multiply the way humans do. Slowly, gradually, they retreated deeper into the wild places, into the forests and hills where humans came less frequently. And then came the long night, and everything changed. Chapter 2: The Long Night and the Wall that Endures. There are nights when I wake in darkness and feel, just for a moment, a whisper of what that time must have been like. That moment when you open your eyes and see nothing. When the world is reduced to sound and touch. When light seems like a distant memory rather than a temporary absence. And then I light a candle, or the moon emerges from behind clouds, and the familiar world returns. But in the long night, there was no returning light. There was only darkness and cold, and the slow realization that this time winter had come and would not leave. We do not know exactly when the long night began. The maesters argue about it, some placing it 8,000 years before our current age, others saying it was closer to 6,000. The chronology of those ancient times is so uncertain, so dependent on oral traditions passed down through generations who could not write, that any date we assign must be taken as an approximation at best. But the when matters less than the what, and what happened during the long night is seared into the collective memory of every people in the known world, not just in Westeros, but in Essos as well. A winter came that lasted a generation. Think on that for a moment. Not the long winters we know now. Those 3 or 4 year stretches of cold and snow that test the patience and stores of even the most prepared households. This was a winter that went on so long that children were born, grew to adulthood, and died without ever seeing spring. The snow fell in drifts, dozens of feet deep. The ice wind howled down from the north without ceasing. Crops failed, livestock perished, and the food stores that had seemed so ample dwindled and vanished until people faced a choice between starvation and terrible deeds that desperation drove them to. But the cold and darkness were not the worst of it. From the uttermost north, from the lands of always winter that lie beyond even the territories the wildlings now claim, came the others. We call them White Walkers in our time, when most people believe them to be nothing more than stories to frighten children. But in the long night, they were terrifyingly real. Beings of ice and death, riding pale dead horses, wielding weapons of ice so cold they shattered iron and steel at their touch. The others moved through the woods, silent as shadow, leaving only death in their wake. And the dead did not stay dead. Those who fell to the others' blades rose again as whites, corpses animated by fell magic, their eyes glowing with unnatural blue light, compelled to serve the very beings who had killed them. An army of the dead followed the others south, growing larger with every village they destroyed, every settlement they overran, every desperate stand of the living that ended in slaughter. The first men and the children found themselves facing an enemy that cared nothing for the pact, nothing for borders or treaties or any human or child concept of order. The others simply came, implacable as the tide, spreading death and cold before them like a plague. Old hatreds and differences meant nothing in the face of this threat. The only choice was to stand together or die together. And so the ancient alliance between first men and children was renewed, this time in fire and blood rather than peaceful ceremony. The war that followed has passed into legend, its details blurred by time and the embellishments of countless retellings. We know that it was desperate, that entire kingdoms fell to the other's advance, that there were moments when it seemed that all would be lost, that the living would be extinguished, and only the dead would remain to walk a frozen world. The stories speak of a hero, the last hero they call him, who went north to seek the children of the forest and their green seers, who travelled with 12 companions through frozen wastes where the others hunted them relentlessly. The tales say that one by one, the last hero's companions fell to cold, or to the others themselves, along with his dog and his horse, until he alone remained, stumbling through the snow on the edge of death. And it was then, at his moment of greatest desperation, that he found what he sought and the knowledge needed to turn the tide. What that knowledge was, the songs do not say precisely. Some speak of discovering that weapons made of dragon glass could kill the others, could shatter those icy forms, and return them to whatever void had spawned them. Others tell of forging a sword called Lightbringer through sacrifice and sorrow, a blade that burned with its own inner fire. What we can say with more confidence is that eventually, somehow, the living prevailed. In what is called the Battle for the Dawn, the combined forces of first men and children drove the others back, pushed them north into the frozen lands from which they had come. The long night ended, though whether because the living won some decisive victory, or because the others simply withdrew for reasons of their own, we cannot know for certain. But the heroes of that age knew that memory is short, and that future generations might grow complacent, might forget the terror that had nearly destroyed all life in Westeros. They knew that the others might return, that whatever dark place had spawned them might send them forth again when humanity had grown soft and forgetful. And so they determined to build a barrier, a wall that would stand between the lands of men and the frozen north. A fortification so massive that it could not be breached, so enduring that it would last for all the ages to come. The task fell to a man whose name has become synonymous with building itself, Brandon Stark, called Bran the Builder. Whether he was a single historical figure or a legendary composite of many builders, we cannot say. The maesters debate it still. But the wall he is credited with raising is no legend. It stands yet, 300 miles long, stretching from the mountains in the west to the sea in the east, built of ice and magic, intertwined in ways we no longer fully understand. 700 feet tall, the wall looms over the landscape like a cliff of blue-white ice, its surface gleaming in sunlight, glowing faintly under the moon and stars. To stand at its base and look up is to feel the weight of ages, to understand in your bones that this is no ordinary human construction, but something born from desperation and magic, and the determination to never again face what had nearly destroyed the world. The legends say that Bran the Builder had help in its construction. The giants, those massive beings who once roamed all of Westeros, are said to have labored alongside humans, using their tremendous strength to move blocks of ice that no team of horses could budge. The children of the forest contributed as well, weaving their magic into the very substance of the wall, imbuing it with protections that would keep the others from passing through or over it. Some say there are spells carved into the ice itself, invisible to normal eyes, but potent nonetheless. Wards and barriers that have held for thousands of years. And to guard this wall, To man its castles and patrol its length, the Night's Watch was founded. An order of men sworn to defend the realms of men, to hold the wall against whatever might come from the north, to light the watchfires and sound the horn if the others should ever return. The Watch took no part in the wars and politicking of the kingdoms to the south. Their oath bound them to a single purpose: to be the shield that guards the realms of men, to be the watchers on the wall. In those early days, service in the Night's Watch was considered an honor. The finest warriors, the noblest men, eagerly took the black cloak and swore the ancient words. The Watch numbered in the tens of thousands, manning 19 great castles along the wall's length, each castle a small fortress in its own right, with provisions and weapons, enough to withstand years of siege. The Watch was strong, vigilant, ready for the threat they had been founded to oppose. But as we all know, memory fades. Generations passed, then centuries, then millennia. The others did not return. The wildlings beyond the wall became the focus of the Watch's attention. Small raiding parties of humans, rather than supernatural beings of ice and death. Slowly, the Night's Watch declined. Fewer men volunteered to take the black. The castles became too numerous for the dwindling ranks to man, and one by one they were abandoned, left to fall into disrepair. By our present age, only 3 of the 19 castles remain occupied, and even those are held by a fraction of the men who once defended them. The wall still stands, patient and enduring, ice and magic maintaining its integrity through the long years. But the men who guard it have diminished, and the purpose for which it was built has faded from memory into myth, into legend, into the realm of children's tales that grown men and women no longer believe. Most of the 7 kingdoms pay no attention to the Watch at all, sending them their criminals and cast-offs, the unwanted men that society would just as soon forget. The wall has become a place of exile rather than honor, manned by thieves and rapers, and younger sons with no inheritance, all of them dreaming of warmer climes and easier lives. But the wall remembers, even if men forget. And on clear nights, when the aurora dances in the northern sky, and the wind carries the smell of cold from the land of always winter, the men of the Watch sometimes feel a chill that has nothing to do with the temperature. They remember the old stories then, the ones the old men tell to new recruits, the tales of the long night and what came before the dawn. And they look north into the darkness and wonder, just for a moment, if the watch they keep might still matter after all these thousands of years. The fire has burned low again, the embers pulsing with that gentle rhythm that makes watching them so hypnotic. Outside my window, the stars have wheeled farther across the sky. It must be well past midnight now, moving into those deep hours when the world is at its quietest, when even the usual sounds of the city fade to near silence. I can hear my own breathing, steady and slow, and the scratch of my quill when I pause to make notes in the margins of my pages. Chapter 3: Songs, Legends, and the Whispers of Prophecy. There is a song that is sung in taverns throughout the Seven Kingdoms. A ballad about a knight named Sir Duncan the Tall and his unlikely squire, Egg, who was actually a prince in disguise. The song tells of their adventures in the years before Egg became King Aegon V, of how they wandered the realm righting wrongs and proving that true honor exists even in humble men. It is a good song, with a rousing chorus that drunken men love to bellow out. And like many such songs, it contains elements of truth wrapped in layers of embellishment and romantic fancy. I have read the actual chronicles of that era, studied the sparse records that document Duncan and Egg's real travels. The true story is both more mundane and more interesting than the song suggests. They were not the flawless heroes of legend, but complicated men navigating a complicated world, making mistakes, suffering consequences, occasionally succeeding despite their limitations. But the song serves a different purpose than the chronicles. It teaches values, provides examples of behavior to emulate or avoid, creates shared cultural touchstones that unite people across regional and class divides. Songs and legends are how most people in Westeros understand their history. The small folk cannot read the chronicles kept in castle libraries, do not have access to the carefully maintained records of the Citadel. What they know of the past comes from stories told by parents and grandparents, from ballads sung by travelling musicians, from tales swapped in taverns and around hearth fires on long winter nights. These stories shape their understanding of what it means to be brave or honourable, what the natural order of society should look like, how the world works according to the wisdom passed down through generations. Consider the legend of Bran the Builder, that semi-mythical figure credited with constructing Winterfell and the Wall, and supposedly a dozen other great structures throughout Westeros and beyond. Did such a man truly exist? Was he a single historical figure, or a legendary composite of many builders whose achievements were combined and attributed to one name? We cannot say with certainty. But the legend of Bran the Builder teaches that great works are possible when humans dedicate themselves to ambitious projects, that the impossible can be made real through skill and determination, and the willingness to undertake tasks that may require generations to complete. Or take the story of Lan the Clever, the legendary founder of House Lannister, who supposedly won Casterly Rock through trickery rather than conquest. The tales say he infiltrated the rock through a hidden passage and convinced the lords who dwelt there that it was haunted, driving them out so he could claim the fortress for himself. The details of the story strain credulity, and no historical evidence supports the more fantastical elements. But the legend establishes the Lannister character, the house's pride in cleverness and strategic thinking, their preference for winning through wit when possible rather than through brute force. The Age of Heroes is full of such figures, legendary men and women whose very existence is questionable but whose stories have shaped the identity of the great houses and regions of Westeros. Garth Greenhand, the mythical ancestor of nearly every noble house in the Reach. Durin Godsgrief, who supposedly built Storm's End to withstand the wrath of gods. Simeon Stareyes, the blind knight who had sapphires for eyes and could see through them. These tales exist in that grey space between a history and myth, too detailed and widespread to dismiss entirely, but too fantastical to accept without skepticism. Then there are the prophecies, those troubling glimpses of supposed future events that have haunted the powerful throughout history. The maesters are skeptical of prophecy, seeing it as a dangerous distraction at best, an outright charlatan at worst. Yet prophecies persist, whispered in the halls of power, recorded in obscure texts, shaping decisions in ways that often prove self-fulfilling. The Targaryens were particularly susceptible to prophecy, seeing it as connected to the dragon dreams that some members of their house experienced. Aegon the Conqueror reportedly had prophetic visions that influenced his decision to invade Westeros. His descendant Daenerys the Dreamer foresaw the doom of Valyria, her dream leading the Targaryens to leave for Dragonstone 12 years before the cataclysm destroyed their homeland. Whether these dreams were genuine glimpses of the future, or simply lucky guesses combined with wise precaution, they became part of the Targaryen mythology, evidence of their exceptional nature. More troubling are the prophecies that seem designed to drive their subjects to ruin. The Woods Witch who prophesied that the prince who was promised would be born of Aerys, and Rhaella's line may have contributed to the madness that eventually destroyed the Targaryen dynasty. Aerys became obsessed with prophecy, making increasingly erratic decisions based on perceived signs and portents. His obsession contributed to the suspicion and paranoia that led to rebellion and his eventual death. If the prophecy was false, it nonetheless shaped events through the actions of those who believed in it. The prince who was promised, Azor Ahai reborn, the stallion who mounts the world. These prophesied saviors and their various names surface throughout the histories and legends of multiple cultures. The details vary, but the general pattern remains consistent across civilizations. A great hero will arise in a time of darkness and despair, will wield a flaming sword or lead a great host, will save humanity from some existential threat. These prophecies comfort people, providing hope that when the worst comes, someone will rise to meet it. But prophecies can also paralyze, causing people to wait for salvation rather than acting to save themselves. They can mislead, seeming to point in one direction when the truth lies elsewhere entirely. And they can corrupt, leading those who believe themselves to be the prophesied hero to commit terrible acts in service of their supposed destiny. I have spent long hours in the library studying these prophecies, comparing different versions, tracing how they evolved and changed as they passed from culture to culture, generation to generation. What I have concluded is that prophecy tells us more about human fears and hopes than about any actual future. We want to believe that the universe has a plan, that suffering serves some larger purpose, that heroes will arise when needed. So we create these stories, these promised saviors, and we watch for signs of their coming, even when no such signs exist. The songs that survive longest, the legends that persist through centuries, the prophecies that continue to command belief despite countless failed predictions, all share certain characteristics. They speak to deep human needs, addressing questions of meaning and purpose that cannot be answered through simple observation of the material world. They provide frameworks for understanding chaos, imposing narrative structure on the random events of history. They teach moral lessons, though the morals they teach may vary considerably depending on who is telling the story and to what purpose. Consider the Song of the Rains of Castamere, that chilling ballad about the destruction of House Rain by Tywin Lannister. It serves as a warning to anyone who might consider challenging Lannister authority, a reminder that defiance will be met with total annihilation. But it also reveals the character of those who embrace such a song, who find pride in the complete destruction of their enemies, who value fear as a tool of governance. The song exists in the uncomfortable space between celebration and warning, teaching different lessons depending on whether you identify with the Lannisters or with those they destroyed. Or take the Bear and the Maiden Fair, a bawdy song popular in taverns and feast halls throughout the realm. On the surface, it is simply a humorous tale of a maiden pursued by an amorous bear, full of double entendres that make it unsuitable for polite company. But examined more carefully, it contains elements of older myths about the relationships between humans and animals, hints of traditions that predate the Andal invasion, echoes of the first men's beliefs about the natural world and humanity's place within it. The singers who travel the realm, moving from castle to castle and town to town, are the primary keepers and transmitters of these songs and stories. They learn the ballads that please their audiences, adapt them to local tastes, create new verses to comment on current events. They are not scholars in the formal sense, do not concern themselves with separating fact from fiction or distinguishing historical truth from entertaining embellishment. But in their own way, they preserve and transmit culture as surely as any maester with his carefully maintained chronicles. I have known many singers over the years, hosting them here at the Citadel, or encountering them during my travels before I forged my chain. Some were genuinely talented, possessing voices that could make you weep or laugh, able to bring ancient stories to life with such vividness that you felt transported to another time and place. Others were mediocre performers who scraped by on a handful of well-known songs, doing little to advance their art, but serving nonetheless to keep the old tales in circulation. All of them shared a love for their craft, a deep appreciation for the power of story and song to move human hearts and shape human understanding. As dawn begins to break outside my window, as the candles that have lit my work burn down to their final flickers, I find myself thinking about the relationship between the knowledge we maesters preserve and the stories that singers spread. We like to imagine that our careful records and skeptical inquiry represent truth, while their songs are mere entertainment or propaganda. But perhaps the division is not so clear. Our chronicles select and emphasize certain facts while omitting others, imposing our own narratives on the chaos of historical events. Their songs, for all their embellishment, often capture emotional and moral truths that our dry records miss. Both are needed. The chronicles provide the skeletal structure of what happened, the dates and names and basic facts that anchor our understanding in reality. The songs provide the flesh and blood, the emotional texture, the meaning that makes historical events relevant to current lives. Together, they preserve the past in forms that serve different but equally important purposes. The prophecies, I am less certain about. They exist in a category apart, neither history nor entertainment, but something else entirely. Perhaps they are best understood as articulations of deep human fears and hopes, given narrative form and projected onto the future because we find it difficult to confront them directly in the present. We fear the return of winter and the others. So we tell ourselves a hero will come to save us. We hope that our suffering serves some larger purpose. So we create prophecies that suggest the future will vindicate our present struggles. Whether any prophecy has ever genuinely foretold actual future events, I cannot say with certainty. What I can say is that belief in prophecy has shaped history in profound ways, for both good and ill. And that perhaps is the only truth about prophecy that matters. Not whether it can predict the future, but how it influences the present through the actions of those who believe. A final meditation as morning comes. The candles have guttered out now, all save one that clings stubbornly to life, though it cannot last much longer. The sky outside my window has shifted from black to deep blue, and soon the sun will rise, spilling golden light across Old Town and marking the beginning of another day. The city is waking, though still mostly quiet, just the earliest risers beginning to stir. Bakers firing their ovens, fishermen heading to the docks. The industrious few who meet the morning before the majority have even considered ending their night. I should sleep. My eyes are heavy, and I have duties later that will require a clearer mind than I currently possess. But I find myself reluctant to close these books, to put away the parchments and scrolls I have been consulting, to extinguish that last candle and let darkness reclaim this chamber, even briefly before the daylight makes it unnecessary. There is something precious about these hours we have spent together, wandering through the deep history of Westeros, touching on its legends and lore, considering the great castles and the institutions that preserve knowledge, allowing ourselves to drift through stories without the pressure of needing to understand them fully or reach definitive conclusions about their truth or meaning. The world of Westeros is vast and old, layered with complexity that no single lifetime could hope to fully comprehend. The children of the forest dwelt here for thousands of years before humans arrived, living in ways we can barely imagine now. The first men brought their own culture and traditions, clashing with what they found but eventually adapting, creating something new through the fusion of different ways of being in the world. The long night came and nearly destroyed everything, teaching lessons about vigilance and the importance of standing against existential threats that each generation must learn anew. The wall was built, a monument to determination, and the recognition that some defenses must be maintained even when the enemy seems distant or mythical. The Night's Watch took its vows and stood its vigil, though over the centuries that vigil has diminished. Until now, it continues more from stubborn tradition than from genuine understanding of its original purpose. The great castles rose, each one unique, each one reflecting the character and priorities of the house that built it. Winterfell with its hot springs and crypts, the Red Keep with its political intrigue, Dragonstone with its alien grandeur, the Eyrie with its impossible defiance of gravity and common sense. They stand still, or most of them do, weathering the centuries and the conflicts that sweep across the realm like storms, enduring because stone and well-laid foundations outlast even the greatest human ambitions. The maesters keep their chronicles and train their ravens, preserving knowledge and providing the communication infrastructure that helps bind the seven kingdoms together, despite their vast distances and regional differences. The singers travel the realm with their instruments and their voices, carrying stories and songs that teach and entertain in equal measure. And the prophecies linger in the background, whispered by woods witches and dragon dreamers, shaping events through the belief they inspire even when their literal truth remains forever in question. All of this history, all these stories and structures and institutions, form the foundation of the world in which current events unfold. The great game of thrones that lords and ladies play. The wars and alliances and betrayals that mark each generation happen against this deep backdrop of ages past, influenced by traditions and memories that stretch back beyond any living person's experience. Understanding this history does not provide clear answers to present dilemmas. Knowing that the long night happened does not tell us how to respond if winter comes again. Studying the fall of ancient dynasties does not guarantee we can prevent new ones from repeating their mistakes. But it provides context, helps us see that our current problems are not unprecedented, that humans have faced darkness before, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes found ways to persevere. And there is comfort in that, I think. Comfort in knowing that the world has endured, that it has weathered long nights and doom and countless smaller catastrophes, that the sun has continued to rise even after the darkest times. The comfort is not absolute. We know that civilizations have fallen, that knowledge has been lost, that the survivors of catastrophe sometimes emerged into worlds diminished from what came before. But still, they emerged. Still, they rebuilt. Still, they found ways to carry on. The last candle flickers one final time and goes out, leaving only the pale pre-dawn light from the window to illuminate my chamber. It is enough. I can see the texts arrayed on my desk, the quill resting in its stand, the empty wine cup that will need to be refilled before I face another evening of study. I can see the outline of the furniture, the darker shadows where the hearth has gone cold, the gradations of grey that will soon bloom into colour as the sun makes its appearance. Westeros sleeps still, or most of it does. In farmhouses scattered across the realm, families dream of harvests and weddings and all the small hopes that make life worth living. In castles and keeps, lords and ladies rest beneath heavy quilts, their schemes and ambitions set aside temporarily for the restoration that only sleep can provide. The Night's Watch stands its vigil on the wall, some men alert and others drowsing at their posts, all of them cold and mostly bored, watching for threats that have not materialized in their lifetimes. And in the Citadel, In chambers throughout this sprawling complex of learning, other maesters sleep or work, or simply sit as I do, contemplating the accumulated wisdom of ages and their own small place within that vast accumulation. We are not heroes, we maesters. We do not win thrones or slay dragons or save kingdoms through valor and sacrifice. But we keep the records. We preserve the knowledge. We ensure that what has been learned is not lost, that the mistakes of the past are documented for those with wisdom enough to study them. That is enough, I think. More than enough. To be a small link in a long chain. To add a few pages to a library that will outlast us all. To train a few ravens and teach a few students. And make some tiny contribution to the great project of human understanding. This is worthy work, quiet work, the kind that happens in candlelit chambers, while the rest of the world sleeps and dreams and goes about its louder business. The eastern sky is brightening now, shifting from blue to a pale rose that heralds the coming sun. Soon, it will be fully day, and this strange vigil I have kept, these hours of wandering through history and story, will come to their natural end. I will sleep, though probably not well, and certainly not long. There are books to return to the library, correspondence to attend to, the ordinary duties of a maester's life that will reclaim my attention and energy. But for now, for these last quiet moments before the day truly begins, I can sit here and feel the weight of all that history, all those centuries of human experience preserved in texts and songs, and the memories embedded in ancient stones. I can let it wash over me like a tide, knowing that I am connected to something larger than myself, that I am part of a continuity that stretches back to the Dawn Age and forward to times I cannot imagine. The stories will continue, the chronicles will be kept, the ravens will fly, the wall will stand, the castles will endure their slow weathering, stones settling and walls cracking, but the essential structures remaining. And humans will continue their endless struggles and celebrations, their small joys and enormous tragedies, their determination to find meaning and purpose in a world that offers no guarantees of either. This is Westeros, ancient and complex, beautiful and terrible, a land of ice and fire, where winter is always coming, but spring has always eventually returned. A place of real history and legendary embellishment, so thoroughly intertwined that separating them becomes an exercise in futility, a realm of great houses and small folk, of maesters and singers, of prophecies and pragmatism, all coexisting in uneasy tension. May you rest well, friend, whether you find yourself in Westeros or in the world beyond it. May the stories comfort you as they have comforted generations before. May the knowledge that others have faced darkness and endured give you strength for your own struggles. And may you wake to find that morning has come, as it always does, bringing with it new possibilities and the chance to add your own small verse to the song of the world. thank you for keeping this vigil with me, for walking these ancient halls and listening to these old stories. If you enjoyed this gentle journey through the history and lore of Westeros, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to The Sleeping Sleuth for more explorations of the worlds we love, told softly and at length for those quiet hours when the day has ended, but sleep has not quite found us yet. Until next time, may your dreams be peaceful, your rest be deep, and your waking be gentle. Good night.